I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars. Today I'm reviewing this, the new Skoda Karoq entry grade. Over the last few years, Skodas have become a bit more expensive. The value has still been there, in my opinion, and Skoda Australia says most people buy loaded out top spec grades anyway. But what the brand has been missing is more affordable grades like they used to have to get people in the door, and also to give you an alternative to buying a Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, those sort of more value pitched brands. Now that Volkswagens, related to Skodas internally, have also become more expensive, there's definitely an entry for Skoda to start selling some more affordable models and conquesting some market share. So that's what this car is all about. This is $39,990 drive away. Skoda wants you to consider the entry Karoq over something like a Toyota RAV4 or a Mazda CX-5, cars that are bigger than this vehicle. But as we'll see, the comparison isn't quite so easy. We're going to jump inside the Karoq in today's video. We're going to take it for a drive. I'm going to let you know whether this should be on your shopping list. Before we get started, hit subscribe below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Jump into the new entry-level Skoda Karoq, and you do know that you're in a base model, but it's a European base model. So compared to some of this car's rivals, the plastics are of a higher quality, the build feels tight, everything feels kind of heavy and hewn from granite, which I think is what you want when you buy something like a Skoda Karoq over maybe a Mazda CX-5 or a Toyota RAV4, which are very good cars, which I rate well, but they just don't have the same level of solidity as vehicles like this, at least perceived solidity. Now, you can tell also from the outside it's a base model because it does have smaller wheels, and in this sort of base white color, it looks base-ish, but there are other colors, and I would probably choose one of the metallics in order to give it a slightly deeper finish outside. But what have we got here in the interior? Well, we've got a good amount of tech, but not as much tech as you get on the higher versions of this car, which also have option packages that let you layer on more and more features. Here at the base grade, it's fairly simple. We've got an 8-inch touchscreen here in the center, no integrated navigation, but you do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it is wireless in the Karoq entry level as well. Looking forward, we've got another small-ish screen, so a smaller screen than what you get in the Karoq style, which sits on top of this car, but you still get most of the information you need. Your trip computer, your media, your fuel consumption, all of that sort of thing can be displayed in front of you. Plus, you get the same nice steering wheel as what you get on the other Karoqs. Perforated leather, lovely sort of metal effect rollers for your volume, all hard keys. And that's one thing you notice about the Karoq is it hasn't switched to all touch-based controls like what you get in most Volkswagens these days. Hard buttons, dials for your fan speed, temperature, everything has a control, and this interior is just beautifully easy to use. It also feels upmarket, you know, all the finishes just are a cut above what you get at this price in most other rivals. There is a step back in the seats, however, compared to the Karoq style, and for me, I'm quite particular about seats, so I would want to take both versions for an extended test drive to see which one I like better. These ones are still shapely, comfortable and supportive, but they lose adjustable lumbar here in the front, which might make a difference to you, but again, you'll only be able to find out if you take a test drive. In terms of packaging and storage, it's pretty good. We've got some room down here with what would have been a wireless charger on other grades. Now it's just a bin. You got USB-C ports. You have a nice adjustable armrest here, which really helps the ergonomics of the interior, plus big door bins as well. So on the whole, for $39,990 drive away, this is a nice place to spend time. Let's check out the back seats now. But I think it's really the back seat of the Karoq which is quite amazing, and that's because while this car is under 4,400 millimeters in length, making it, in my opinion, a big small SUV, even though Skoda calls it their medium SUV, the back seat really belies anything like a small SUV, and it's bigger than many rivals in the mid-size SUV class. So I've got this driver's seat in my position. I'm 6 foot taller, 183 centimeters. As you can see, I've got lots of legroom, good tow room, excellent headroom as well. I think it's definitely more spacious back here than I would be in a Mazda CX-5, for instance, which is quite tight in the cabin despite being a bigger car overall. So Skoda's really trying to trade on the packaging efficiency of this vehicle, which has given it lots of room inside despite those small dimensions, which Skoda also says is a good feature of the car because many of its urban customers don't have a garage. They park on the street so they can get this car into a smaller parking spot. Obviously there's a bit of marketing there, but it does also make sense. You've got a fifth seat in the center. You can use it if you need to. But you also have a nice armrest here with 2.5 cup holders, soft armrest over here too, so it doesn't feel you know, too down market here in the back. The seat itself is also comfortable, but what you miss compared to more expensive versions of the Karoq is the VarioFlex seating. So if you go up one grade, you get fully independent seats here in the back, which can even be removed to turn it into a little van. Here in the base model, we've just got a standard back seat. You do have air vents, however, and a 12-volt socket, though no USB-C ports for those people here in the back. They'll need to share the ones up front. Now let's check out the boot, and the theme from the back seat continues. It's bigger than you'd expect. Open up the manual tailgate, which I think is acceptable at this price, and you find 521 litres of space, much more than you get in a Mazda CX-5, despite the Skoda being a lot smaller. How have they done it? Well, a short front end for starters, but also just real packaging efficiency inside. It's really nice to see. It's a big square boot. It's got some special features, some hooks, 12-volt socket, some cubbies, a ski pass-through, and you can even release the folding seats from right here in the boot. Can't think of another car in this class at this price that has that. Very nice. You lift up the boot floor and you find the pièce de résistance. Full-size spare wheel, definitely rare in 2024 and very rare on a European car. So nice and flexible and good for people that live or drive a lot in the country. Plus a hook there to help you close the boot without getting your hands dirty. While the purchase price is relatively attractive on this car, as are some of the finance offers that Skoda offers in Australia at this point in time, running costs are a real strength of the Karoq. Even though it requires premium petrol, it's so economical on the highway and on the open road. You'll easily get towards that 5 litre per 100 kilometre mark without trying too hard. In urban areas, expect something around the mid-8s. It does make sense to purchase a 7-year service plan for this vehicle. It costs $2,750, but it includes 105,000 kilometres of scheduled maintenance. And the warranty is 7 years with unlimited Ks. Well, let's go for a drive in the new entry-level Skoda Karoq. And unlike some of the other models that Skoda has been launching recently, this is not a limited edition. This is a permanent fixture to the range, and even though the Karoq will be renewed with a facelift in 2024, it's very likely that it will also have an entry-level model much like this one continuing on. So this is a permanent fixture. What do you get for your $39,990? Well, simply put, what you're getting is a car which is more sophisticated, more mature, more grown up to drive than what you get at this price at rival manufacturers like Toyota, like Hyundai, like Kia. They have larger cars. Certainly this is really a stretch calling the Karoq a midsize SUV, but the interior space is amazing. The packaging is just tremendous on this vehicle. So whether you consider it a big small SUV as I do, or a small medium SUV as Skoda does, either way it is a good usable family vehicle. But what you're getting is a really nice turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine, whereas for this price, most other manufacturers, you're getting a non-turbo engine, you're getting a CVT, and those combinations work well, but they use more fuel, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, and you really have to rev them out in order to accelerate quickly. Now, quick acceleration isn't always the most important thing in a family SUV, but for things like merging onto the highway, overtaking a truck on a country road, you want the performance to be peppy, and in the Karoq, it most certainly is. The power figure is a little bit misleading. The 1.4 litre makes 110 kilowatts of power, which is not so high. It's actually the torque, 250 Newton meters at low RPMs, which tells you the story. The Karoq is pretty effortless for most of your driving. You know, pulling away from intersections like this, the engine only needs to rev to 2,500 revs to pull away really quite swiftly. Whereas in a CVT equipped car, you'd be hearing those revs much more prominently as the engine searches for its torque band. In the Karoq with the 110 TSI turbo engine, that muscularity is accessible at a much lower point in the engine's performance band. And so it's more relaxing to drive, and it's pretty effortless for your day-to-day tasks, good on the highway, good on country roads as well. That being said, if you are really wanting to pound up a long uphill section, as I did yesterday in this car, you do notice, you know, if you're a very keen, very sporting driver, you will notice a little bit of a performance deficit at times. But the important point is that you can remedy that because Skoda has a 140 kilowatt all-wheel drive version of the Karoq available for sale too. Now, obviously you pay a lot more for the 140 TSI version, but as an entry-level power plant, this is impressive and better than the competition. Then you come to the really mature and sophisticated part, which is the way the Karoq rides and handles. It is a sporty car to drive in the corners, in that the front end is darty, it's energetic. This car actually really likes the bends, and yet it still manages to maintain a pretty compliant, pretty comfortable ride the rest of the time, which is what you want out of a family vehicle like this. The entry-level Karoq has a slightly smaller alloy wheel than the other versions in the range. It's got a little bit more of a chunky tire, and that's going to give you your compliance over urban bumps and potholes, and we've seen a number of those for the last couple of days. Now again, if you go searching for this car's limits, which I don't think many people are going to do, that's where you will notice that the Karoq has a torsion beam rear suspension rather than multi-link independent rear suspension, which you would find on the 140 TSI version of this car. But you really are hard pressed to tell that. You'll only notice in very bumpy technical bends, you'll feel that the rear end of the Karoq doesn't have all that much more to give you in terms of helping out the front end. But this is technical stuff, this is sporty stuff. This thing is an entry-level family SUV, and for 99% of driving, it feels tight, it feels compliant, it feels well suited to the task. There's a little bit of rumble in the interior, however. The torsion beam might be responsible for part of that, but you just get the impression that this car doesn't have a ton of sound deadening. We're rolling along at 50 kilometers per hour. There's pronounced rumble from this surface, and it does get a little bit louder on country roads, B roads at 80 kilometers per hour, but on a smooth highway, it certainly settles down. You just notice a bit of a resonance in the interior of the Karoq that you actually don't notice in the cabin of the smaller Skoda Karoq. And for me, the existence of the Karoq is actually the Karoq's biggest problem. Now, the Karoq is considerably smaller, so that won't suit all buyers, of course, but it is also incredibly well packaged, just like the Karoq. Skoda has also just introduced a run-out model, which will last 3 or 4 months in stock here in Australia, which is only $32,990, and you don't lose out on all that much compared to the Karoq. So it is a $7,000 step to come up to the Karoq compared to the Karoq, and all I would say is they're both good cars, both well specified, but I would test drive them both and see if you might be able to get away with the smaller Karoq. Now, we recently had a small SUV mega test on Chasing Cars. Both the Karoq and the Karoq were included, and the Karoq actually won. We all found it to be a little bit more charming, better value, and just an insanely well packaged vehicle. So my advice would simply be to consider both. Lastly, a word on safety. We do have adaptive cruise control here in the base Karoq. That's something you don't actually get in the base Karoq. We've got lane keeping assist, we've got blind spot monitoring, so it still feels like we've got a relatively modern, relatively well filled out list of safety in this car, and the technologies themselves actually work very well. They're better tuned than many rivals, in particular the Toyota RAV4. So those are my opinions on the new Skoda Karoq entry grade. $39,990 drive away. It's a pretty compelling price on a vehicle with this much sophistication. And if you're considering an entry-level RAV4, CX-5, Tucson, vehicles like that, you need to put the Karoq on your shopping list, because even though it is smaller, it looks smaller, that interior, that boot, they are super compelling and well packaged. I do think though, if you can get away with an even smaller size, the Karoq, base model Karoq, has even more value to it at an even lower price point. So make sure you check out both. Very keen to know your opinions. Is Skoda right to push back towards a little bit more of that attainable value at these lower price points? Let me know in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.